All right, so hi everyone. My name is Louis. We're very happy to be here presenting our methodology for building complex governance systems on Ethereum. So yeah, we'll be presenting Kelzen, the framework and distributed application, decentralized application that we built. So we are a small startup based in Paris with quite diverse background, quite young, and we have the mission of tackling the problem of corruption, which is a problem that costs the world more than $2,000 billion each year. Additionally to the $1,500 billion of corrupted public markets that are passed each year. So we do this by basically developing decentralized tools, software tools, and by having three main activities, which are strategic consulting. So we'll be helping our client understand what blockchain technology can do for them and what Ethereum can do for them. We develop smart contracts and we manage technical teams for building dApps or building a decentralized system. And we make education, we make public events to explain to the public what kind of improvement Ethereum can bring to society. So some of you may know us since we developed and published Kelzen last year in June, which is a smart contract framework and a dApp for building incorruptible governance systems. So today we're gonna talk about three things. First is what is Kelzen and how does it work. The second one will be our methodology, and then if we have some time, which is not sure, we'll do a quick demo. All right?
Hello, so my name is Henry, I work with Louis. So what is Kelzen? When we started to design Kelzen, our objective was to be able to design any kind of governance system in a way that is easy to modify and to understand. So in order to be able to design any kind of governance, the first step we had was to come up with a methodology to design governance system, or at least to categorize governance system. So the very first thing Kelzen is it's a way to read a governance system and to design it, to put it in a box and to come up with a diagram that helps you categorize your governance system. The second thing Kelzen is it's a set of smart contracts that are independent one from the other, that can be used as Lego bricks to put the diagram you came up with in practice and to deploy your organization on an Ethereum-based blockchain. And the third thing we did with Kelzen was to build an interface that helps you interact with the smart contract you deployed, so that you can first design your organization, then deploy it, then interact with it. So when we came up with this methodology, we had several criteria in mind. The first one was that it needed to be secure. For it to be secure, it needed to be simple, because I saw it in another slide, in another presentation today. It's a bit of a commonplace to say that complexity is the enemy of security. We very much agree with it, and you'll figure out that our model is quite simple to understand. The second thing we wanted it to be was open, of course, and the fourth thing, which is actually the most important, is we wanted it to be modular, because governance systems are living beings. They're not set in stone. When you have a governance system that works for today, eventually you're gonna want to move it and change it, because that's how a group of people work. Eventually, rules need to be changed. And so we wanted the rules of our system to be able to be updated according to rules set by the community itself. It also allowed us to come up with use cases that were gradual. You start simple, then you build more complex governance system on top of it. So I'm going to explain what our methodology is. I'm going to focus mostly on this because I think that's where most of the value of what we propose come from. So at its core, we imagine governance system as lists talking to each other. So lists of people or things discussing with other lists of people or lists. So to take a very simple example, in France, we have a parliament that is in charge of writing laws. So you have a list of deputies voting to amend, to add, to remove, or to replace an existing list of laws. And these deputies themselves are part of a list that is amended by another list of people who are able to vote in France. So at its core, that's what our methodology is. It's to figure out that governance is list of people or things doing other things to other lists. And once you start seeing your governance model through this prism, you're going to figure out that it's mostly two things. So lists and procedures. A list has a specific procedure to add, remove, or replace an entry in another list. And you can design any, or you can take any kind of existing governance system and design it and draw a diagram of it functioning that way. So our system is based on this paradigm, and we called the lists I mentioned organs, and we call the procedures procedures. The objective was to have a very simple brick, which is the organ, which is the same for every organ or every list, and a wide set of procedures, because procedures can depend. It can be a vote from one people to another one people to elect many other people, or many people to elect one. There's a wide variety. So at the basis, an organ is a list of entries. Who can add an entry? There is another list in the organ that's called the admin list. The admin list is the list of addresses that have the ability to add, remove, or replace references. This list can be people or smart contracts that are themselves procedure. And then there's a higher level list, which is the master list, which is the procedures or people who have the right to amend the system and change the rules by which you add people in the list of norms. Right? It's quite simple when you look at it. It's just a list with two levels of approval. But we can come up with quite interesting thing with it. So for example, this is an example of how we would design a participatory budget using Kelsen. So you have a single organ that lists the people who are part of this participatory budget. This contract, being a contract, can also have a balance. And you have four main procedures. P3 and P4 who are used to add or remove voters. These can be nominations, these can be cooptation, it can be whatever you want. We have P2 and P1 to both add funds or withdraw funds. These proposals can be simply giving the opportunity to somebody from another organ to withdraw funds, or it can be a vote offered to the community. And finally, you have another procedure, which is P0 up there, which is used to change the rule of the system. So let's say, for example, your participatory budget uses a vote to withdraw fund where 51% of the people need to vote yes. And you want to change this rule. You need everyone to agree to use P0 to remove P2 from the system and replace it with a new contract, a new procedure that will then have the authorization to manipulate the funds of the organ. And this is a very simple example, but we have come up with a much more complex one. And I'll let Louis talk about it.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's really what makes Kelsen powerful, is that it's whatever the complexity of the system that you want to build, you'll always be using the same basic fundamental bricks, which are organs and procedures. So here we show what would a Kelsen system look like if it wanted to replicate how the French Constitution works. because we're based in France. And so basically it goes like this. You have this list of voters who will have 3 procedures attached to it. So voters here will be able to vote for 3 things. Vote for the President of the Republic, so the list of all the presidents of the Republic. Actually, there will be only 1 in force, in exercise. They will be able to vote through P2, which is the general elections on representatives at the National Assembly. And they will be able to vote on the Electoral College, who themselves can vote for senators. And the interesting part here is that so you can really draw all the different actors that come into your system and model it with a very high precision. And you'll see that here we have a procedure that will take the President of the Republic, the Speaker of the House, and the Speaker of the Senate to allow them to collectively add members to the Constitutional Court, which is here, which is how the Constitution actually works today. And so then this Constitutional Court will have a veto power here on the legislative process. So representatives and senators will be able to vote on bills, to adopt or reject them, etc., etc. And then you have a check from the Constitutional Court to know if the bill that has just been passed is constitutional or not. And if it is, it's added to the list of passed bills that then need to be put in force by the president, either by this procedure here, P9, where he will just sign the bill through a transaction and add the bill to the organ of the laws in force. And if it's a constitutional reform, he'll be able to use the same procedure that will also change the constitution, but he has the choice of also triggering P0, which is a constitutional referendum, where it's the list of voters that will be able to adopt or reject the amendment. And in this system, what's interesting is that these 2 procedures here are actually master procedure for the entire system. So every organ here can be modified, and every organ has P0 and P9 as their master procedures. And so if you want to change, for instance, how you elect the President of the Republic, you'll pass a constitutional reform through all the necessary steps, and then you'll be able to trigger P0 to modify here the admin of this organ, which is P1, and then add new rules for electing the president. And so you can change the rules, you can change the procedures, but you can also add and remove organs, because if you decide that P1 here will not add a name to the organ of President of the Republic, but instead will create a new committee or a new commission that themselves will be able to name the President of the Republic, well then you can just add more organs or remove organs as long as you follow the constitutional rules. So this is really what Kelsen is about. And you can see that it can be quite interesting to build very complex governance system, because the real world problems that we have usually take very complex governance systems. And in our work, we realize that it's very difficult to code everything from start, hard code everything on a single smart contract, and being able to modify it without having to throw everything away. So that's the basic rationale behind Kelsen. And now the question is for you, how can you use Kelsen in your project? And that's the title of the talk, so no more suspense. We drafted 5 big steps that we use in our everyday work to build these governance systems. And knowing also that Kelsen could be used for governed dApps, DAOs, services, products, organizations, you name it. So the first step here would be to identify all the actors that take place to the governance, or at least a formal role to the governance. Identify stakeholders, so these actors, and also identify the outputs of the governance. So here, for instance, the outputs would be the laws in force. There would be the past bills would be a temporary output, and the constitution would be another output. So if you start by identifying all the stakeholders and all the outputs of your governance system, then you have basically all the organs. And the next steps then will be to create or characterize the relationships between these organs and these people. And we provide tools for that. We identify that there are 3 big types of procedures that we give templates for. One-to-one procedure, so one person will sign a transaction to add one entry to one organ. You'll have many-to-one procedures, so a group of people will be able to vote to add one entry to an organ. Then you'll have many-to-many procedures where many people will be able to vote according to a certain electoral rules to add more than one entries. So once you've done this, you have your admin procedures. You do the same for the master procedures, so define who has the right to modify the system and what are the conditions for everyone to be able to modify the system. And then once you've done these 3 steps, you've basically modeled your governance on paper. And so the last 2 steps that you'll have to do will be to set up the template contracts that we have on our GitHub according to all the rules and processes that you've defined, and then deploy the organs and deploy the procedures. So that's basically, in a nutshell, how to identify and create good governance systems without taking too many risks. And so once you've deployed them, you have one more option to do is to interact with it, because maybe the average voter doesn't know how to code in Solidity or sign transactions. And so we've built a small dApp, a web platform to be able to anyone, even non-developers, to interact with governance systems that are based on Kelsen. We'll see if so maybe what we do.
Yeah, we don't really have time for a demo because there are other speakers after us, but do come and see us. We have a demo running. You can also check out our dApp directly, and our demos are on the Rinkbeat testnet. And we have an NGO, we have a French law incorporation, a specific kind of NGO, and a participatory budget that you can check out.
So maybe during the coffee break, we'll be happy to answer your questions and show you how the system works. A few last remarks before closing. So, as we said, governance is the consequence of a group's culture, of its norms, subjective norms, and sometimes governance is not perfectly formalized. And here, Kelsen won't really help you because we really focus on formal aspects of governance. So, who has a binding rights to the organization? So keep that in mind. Always try to also take individual interest when you're creating a new governance model, not replicating one that already exists. But if you have to create one, always try to take into account individual interest and imagine the worst in order to try to prevent the system to be corrupted. Governance models are living organisms, so please seek feedback, let it adapt, and that means that you need to start with very flexible constitutional procedures, even if you need to make them more complex or more strict afterwards. And also governance. We talk about governance, and it's a very spread out word, but actually it usually means governing 2 kind of things and separate kind of things. Governing strategy of an organization or a project, and governing the operations of the project. So try to keep in mind that when you talk about the one or the other, they each respond to specific objectives, and that these objectives should be prioritized. Yeah.
Yeah, so as a closing remark, I'll just make a call up to you. We need your help. We need your help to read our contracts and find the errors that we did not find. If you're a lawyer, our methodology might be familiar because the methodology is derived from legal work by a person named Hans Kelsen. And if you have remarks for us on how we design our methodology, please reach out, let us know what we did right, what we did wrong. If you think that this methodology can help you in your project, please reach out. We are a small group of developers. We're self-funded. All of the work that we put out, we finance with our own work. We're always looking for new projects if that can help us move forward. So if you think we can collaborate, do reach out. We'll be very happy to work with you. And yes, that was it. Our presentation on Kelsen, how to design modular, easy to use, easy to understand governance models, and we'll be happy to talk to you. Oh yeah, sure. If you have questions,